Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Business Immigration Benchmark. I'm your host, Laura Bonaires. Today, we have a special treat. My friend, colleague, and WR Global Managing Partner, Audrey Lustgarten, will join us to kick back and chat all things summer global travel. A lot of sticky issues with employees requesting to work remotely outside the U.S., anywhere in the world, wanting tourist visas and maybe asking your help. So she'll walk through all the compliance and logistical challenges you may be facing, maybe already. She'll also talk through some tips and tricks for backlog consular appointments to walk us through any solutions that may be available. So with that, we'll jump right in. So Audrey, welcome back to the Business Immigration Benchmark. I know there have been a ton of updates in the global space, and especially since we're approaching the summer holiday season, I wanted to pick your brains about what to look for, what issues our HR Global Mobility clients will be facing as the busy holiday season for summer travel approaches.
Definitely.
To kick it off, we're going to be casual here. This is going to be a fun summer episode where we're just going to kind of chat through some common things that Audrey's clients have faced and that, I have questions because Audrey, like we know, you're our go-to global guru. So I first want to chat about compliance challenges, and that specifically, what advice do you have for work-related trips for employees? What do you counsel your clients, your HR Global Mobility leaders? How are you counseling them to make sure their employees have the right work visas for their summer travel for work to perform those activities?
Yeah, definitely happy to chat about that, Laura. And it's, the global team, it's probably the busiest time of the year for us. Everyone is gearing up for summer travel, whether it is for work or for vacation. Somehow our poor, HR Global Mobility contacts are having to grapple with both simultaneously while they're also occasionally trying to take holiday of their own. So it's a challenging time of the year. For work-related travel, it's super important that you're making sure your employees have the right visas they need. It can be something that's easy to forget. Obviously, when you're relocating someone to another country and they're moving there for a year, 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and definitely everyone involved is going to be aware that you need to deal with the immigration aspect of this. You need the long-term work permits, you need the visas, you need the relocation support for the employee and their family. But when it is a short-term work trip, that can often fly under the radar, but can lead to really significant problems when it does fly under the radar. One of my favorite examples of this is one poor client that I have represented them for, I think, about 14 years at this point, and one of their employees had my cell phone number and got a call from them on the 4th of July that they were being deported from Australia because they had tried to get into the country just for a short work trip. But what they were doing was training, delivering training, and Australia considers that to be work. And they didn't have a short-term work visa. They just had their, electronic travel authorization, and they weren't let in. They were put on a plane back home, and they called me because, of course, they couldn't reach anyone else on the 4th of July to help them while they were in a panic, being sent all the way back to the U.S. So definitely much better to avoid that sort of situation for your employees and to do your due diligence in advance. I always counsel my clients to have, and we help them to set up often, an assessment procedure in place for folks that need to take work trips to make sure that, in advance, is this person going to need a visa or permit or something, even if they're only going for a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's quite possible that they might need a visa, if they're not going for holiday purposes, if they're going for work. And even what seems like, you've had another employee go and they didn't need a visa, you can't necessarily apply that to the next employee. We're always wanting to look at what's the citizenship of the traveler, where are they going, how long are they going to be there, and what are they doing? Because maybe you had someone go for just business meetings for a week, and now you're sending someone to actually lead a training seminar. So that can lead to, as in the Australian example, the need for an entirely different visa for them to be able to get into the country.
So it sounds like the best practice for clients is you recommend these assessment protocol. But my question is, how are successful assessment programs communicating this need or communicating the protocol to the relevant managers and employees? Like, have you seen any companies or clients do this really well? And what are they doing well to make it an effective process, right? Like, you can have an assessment protocol, but no one knows about it or uses it. And it's like you don't have one. So what can you tell us about like a good sort of communication success story within your clients?
Yeah, no, that's definitely the communication and the education and frankly, the enforcement, depending on the environment of the policy, of the international travel assessment policy is absolutely critical. The best program in the world isn't going to work if no one knows about it or no one is actually following it. Our clients, to be perfectly honest, run the gamut from smaller companies that have a fairly informal approach and can because of their size to very large companies that have a very formal lockdown policy. The most extreme example would be where it is, your immigration due diligence or your immigration assessment policy is actually tied to your travel bookings. And so an employee would not be able to book travel that will be paid for by the company without getting a successful immigration assessment result. And you can do things like, requiring them to have a particular code or a particular approval document before they are able to, get in contact with the travel agency or the internal travel team at the corporate client's office to book that flight. An intermediate approach is to, make this available, make it part of the employee onboarding process. So right when they're hired, you're setting that expectation, this role is going to require travel. This is our procedure for travel, everything from this is, the class of airfare you're allowed to purchase to this is our immigration assessment process and you are required to follow it. It's not optional. We've had instances in the past where people were not able to complete critical trips because of this, and we have implemented this policy. We do a lot of training for our clients. We try to work with them on this, and it's a value add that we provide. By virtue of working with WR, we are always really happy when our clients want us to get involved with providing education, because then that makes everything go more smoothly for them and for us. So we will give, webinars that we will record, and the clients will even sometimes include links to those as part of their onboarding or part of their, policy documentation that they are sharing. But it is nice to also have that live, periodic. So for larger clients, we're checking in a couple of times a year. We'll provide training to key managers who supervise employees that are likely to be mobile globally, and so most likely to run into this. But I would say the most successful ones are the ones that have really documented the policy and also, in coordination with their travel agency, whether it's external or internal travel team, have kind of locked it down. So you need this approval before you can book travel.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. And for folks that want more flexibility and don't want to like lock it into travel, what's the argument to not tie it to the reimbursement or the booking travel? Like, what's the counter argument? Like, you want to make sure you have the assessment for obviously the compliance component, but what would be the side to not make it such a strict program?
Yeah, I mean, as an immigration attorney, I don't think there's that much of an argument for it, but I get, the common sense kind of argument would be, the cost and the effort involved. And if you have a smaller company or a larger company with a very small team that travels globally, then it's more feasible for them to have, to not have it locked down because they're dealing with a smaller population. When you have a population in the thousands, it becomes just untenable for an HR global mobility professional to police that, or even to necessarily effectively educate without having that policy and that, kind of locking it down. But when you have a smaller, we work with some, tech startups and things like that, where they don't want to be restrained by, overly formal policies. They have a smaller population. It's feasible to get most of them on a call, to communicate with most of them, one-on-one, to make sure that everyone that's in a critical position that's requiring international travel knows, hey, we have a process. You can go through it to make sure that you're not, going to get an unpleasant surprise when you try to get on that flight.
Okay, cool. Because I was like, am I missing? This sounds like a great policy to tie it with the, booking or reimbursement, because then it really enforces the compliance. I'm like, this seems great, but I see your point. And that we're coming from.
It's a no-brainer. I love it. Yeah. But it's not for everyone. I do understand that.
Cool. I just wanted to see it from the other side. And then another sort of compliance challenge I know that comes up in this space is what should our listeners, our HR Global Mobility folks do for employees who want to work remotely while on holiday? I know this comes up, in fact, recently came up in my practice where, a Chinese national has to go home for an ill family member and wants to extend that trip because they have to do visa stamping and is asking, can I work from China and can I bring my laptop? So that's how it sort of is outlined. But I'm sure you see this all around the world. What's your guidance for our HR Global Mobility leads who are getting these requests to sort of remote work in the sort of, half PTO, half going to work? What do you recommend how they handle that kind of request?
Yeah, it's a tricky request, and it's one that is super common, particularly this time of year and in the, post-pandemic world where we've got, or many of us have access to, our laptops and work from anywhere is really kind of logistically feasible. There's also a heck of a lot of employees, I think, just doing this without asking their HR or global mobility professional. But it is definitely it's an issue as much as our world is global and everyone's traveling and everyone's got their laptop. The immigration laws are a bit behind on that. And in a lot of jurisdictions, it can be really problematic to work remotely for your home employer. So I think that, and I think I've said this in past episodes, it's just about having that policy in place. And I strongly suggest having a menu of options if people are looking to work remotely. If you have, commonly requested locations they're requesting to work remotely from, we or your immigration counsel can work with you to take a look at what are the rules in those jurisdictions, what is allowed. Some jurisdictions, it's no problem. Mexico, for example, has quite a flexible remote work from an immigration perspective. I always have to caveat this and say, we're immigration experts. We're not tax experts. We're not employment law experts. But from an immigration perspective, Mexico is quite flexible. Many people can go there for up to 180 days and actually do productive work as long as they're not hired by a Mexican company or payroll locally, which of course someone on holiday for, a month would not be. But other jurisdictions are really strict, and even doing, a day or two of remote work is just not going to fly if you're aiming for compliance with the immigration laws. So you have to tread carefully, have a company policy as to what is permitted and what is not. And, I recommend working with your counsel to come up with maybe a menu of options, because what you don't want as an HR professional is to be run ragged by people requesting, to work remotely in 72 different countries. And you're like, what do I do with that? I've got to go out and figure out what's allowed in all these different locations. It just becomes really burdensome on HR, who are already, tend to be rather overworked in my experience.
So what I'm hearing is Mexico's on the menu?
Mexico's on the menu. It's lovely, Laura. Highly recommended. Just elected a female president. I mean, good things are happening.
Next podcast recording from Mexico City.
Yeah.
Just kidding. No, that's awesome. I think that's right. I think it also alleviates the conversation for HR Global Mobility that they don't have to just say, no, I rely on the policy. The menu is good because it does give them options, and it feels good to give people something to read, to digest, and that we're not saying no, but we're saying there's some limitations. We can't say yes to everything. We do have a business to run, kind of thing. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to strike a balance and not just have a flat out no, but you've got options. We'll try to work with you, but it's not just a complete open door and you can do whatever you want, wherever.
Yeah, well, in my experience, when someone's asking for something, some folks won't take no for an answer anyway. So it'd be nice to have the prepared, and leader-approved process policy to rely on, so that, it's not me, this is the company's policy, to kind of alleviate that being such a maybe sort of
personal.
Yeah, kind of, it can be taken really personally. So ease that conversation that can get difficult. Okay, so transitioning here. The logistical challenges of summer travel. I know because everybody's wanting to get in their holiday vacations, kids are out of school, everybody's booking things at the same time, surge pricing, but also backlogs at consulates. So what can you tell us about what to expect? And then what kind of helpful tips or tricks can you provide us so we can have in our toolbox going into the busy summer holiday season?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we should probably be doing this episode for Valentine's Day, Laura, because this is probably when people should start planning. But of course, no one wants to hear about summer travel at that point. So we'll work with what we've got here and just say, yes, the backlogs are upon us. It is really difficult to get visa appointments in a lot of different jurisdictions. The Schengen area in Europe is probably the most frequently complained about this time of year because a lot of people like to holiday in Europe, lovely this time of year, and there are really limited appointment slots available. So those go super quick. And at the same time, you have students, that are going to be studying in
Right.
Europe come, they want to get there by August. So it's just kind of combining with the summer travel rush to make it a perfect storm of lack of visa appointments. It is, other than just, getting a time machine and going back to February and booking your appointment. The other thing you can do is, you can think about jurisdiction shopping, but you have to be careful when you do this and you have to be compliant about how you're doing it. There's a lot of misinformation out there on the web about this. So particularly, the Schengen area covers most of the countries in continental Europe are part of it. So the idea is that you can get a visa from one country and that will allow you to travel to that country and also other countries for tourism or for business. It's not for work. Work is still country by country basis. You need your work visa, but it will allow you to travel. So people will go and say, oh, wow, there are no appointments at all at the Consulate General of Italy, for example. I can't get an appointment. I'm going to pop over to, the Spanish consulate and get one there and get my Schengen visa from there, that I'm just going to travel to Italy. So that jurisdiction shopping can be tricky. Like if you can do it, but only if you're actually going to then travel to Spain. Like you actually have to modify your trip if you're going to jurisdiction shop to make sure that you don't run into problems. Because first of all, if you turn up at the consulate of Spain with all sorts of information in your application about how you're going on this lovely, holiday in Italy, they're just going to deny your application.
Right.
If you turn up and you claim that you're going to Spain, but then you actually never go there and you go to Italy, you could also get in trouble. It doesn't happen as often. It's like 100% denial rate if you apply in Spain saying you're going to Italy. That's pretty much a given unless someone's really not paying attention. Sometimes people are able to get a visa from one country and go to another. Obviously, that's a big problem. We've now made a misrepresentation in an immigration application, even though it was only for your holiday. So we don't want to do that. And the other part of it is when you turn up at the airport, there's a possibility that they say, well, this visa was issued by Spain. You've got nothing to do with Spain on your itinerary here. That's, what did you do? Again, not as common, but it is technically possible. So we always say, if you want a jurisdiction shop, that's great, but you have to actually add time onto your holiday or shift it around. And the rule is for the Schengen area that it has to be, you have to apply for your visa with a consulate that is either your place, your country that you're going to stay the longest, or if you're going to stay in two countries the exact same number of days, you're supposed to apply with the one that you're traveling to first. So switching things around can enable you to apply with a consulate that is maybe not quite as backlogged, but has to be done carefully. And obviously that doesn't work for other areas of the world that just have, the one national visa. For those, my advice would be just, looking for those cancellations, or if you can't find, being really diligent. Sometimes the consulates will tell you like what day they release new appointments or when they post canceled appointments back to the system, if you ask politely. And then last possibility would just be asking, sometimes if you ask nicely, consulates will accommodate and will open up additional appointment slots. Definitely not always, but if you're out of other options, it doesn't hurt to ask.
Yeah, because that's the follow-up question. Clients will have, or the employees or the foreign nationals have, that the one that's looking to secure the visa is, well, can I pay a fee? How do I expedite this? I want to throw money at the problem. Is that even possible in these situations?
It depends where you're going. For the Schengen area, no, they don't want your money. Canada, no, they don't want your money. If you're going to the UK, it can be tremendously helpful. They'll take quite a lot of money, but they will deliver the visa quickly. I think the fastest processing option for the UK is 1 day. You can get a visa. I also think it's up to about $2,000 right now, additional to make that happen. And then obviously if that's legitimate above board in the published government fee schedule, do exercise caution though if you're in a jurisdiction where, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act might be implicated to not throw money at the problem. If that's a jurisdiction like that, there are online indices of where that is and isn't a problem. If you're not familiar with the jurisdiction your employee is going to, you want to make sure you're only paying legitimate government fees for expediting, not
Very
anything
good point.
else.
Very good point. Yeah, no, it's just often, especially in the U.S. cases, like there's not always a route for expedite, and explaining that can be really difficult. So it sounds like sometimes, not always, and be very careful about paying extra fees.
Yes.
That's the too long didn't read explanation there. Moving to the next point, this one comes up and is a sticky situation when your employees come to you as the HR global mobility leader and are asking for letters that will support a tourist visa. So whether that's someone trying to come into the U.S. for tourism or around the world for tourism, what is your guidance for our HR global mobility leads when they're asked by employees to provide some sort of letter when their trip has nothing to do with work?
Yeah, no, this is a source of anxiety, I think, for a lot of our clients. I get a lot of messages this time of year. It's like, the employee gave me this to sign. What should I do? And rightfully so. I mean, as an HR professional, you have to be pretty careful about what you're signing off on and who you're giving it to and what information you're disclosing. But I would say if it is just a basic letter confirming that they're employed with you and that they're taking PTO for this, duration of time, I wouldn't, from an immigration perspective, really have a concern with signing off on that. Of course, if they're combining it with, saying they're going to be working there, doing something for the company, I think that's when more red flags go up. But if they're taking 2 weeks of PTO and going on their Italian holiday, signing off on a letter saying, yes, so-and-so works for us in this office. Yes, he has approved PTO from this date to that date. And, providing your contact information in case they want to confirm that, which, it's fairly rare that the consulate goes to the trouble of calling. I think that's legitimate. And honestly, you probably have quite a few unhappy employees if you're not willing to provide that basic level of employment confirmation, because they won't be able to get their visas without it in most circumstances.
Yeah, and a lot of that information, especially with most of our clients, companies having, any kind of HRIS system, they could get a lot of printouts or perhaps, and I know we run into this occasionally in the US space, they can have like an automated letter almost from, it wouldn't necessarily have a signature on it, but it would be like verified from the Workday or whatever HRIS system they have that like confirms the PTO, confirms the position, location, that kind of thing. So but to your point, I think you're right. Like having an HR mobility person sign off on a letter confirming the things that they can see in HRIS seems totally legitimate. And it seems like they might need those letters for tourism visas because the intent to return to home country, right? Like that's the reason for that. Okay.
Exactly. It's a combination. It's intent to return to home country and also, financial stability or, sufficient financial needs to undertake the trip.
Got it.
Some of those letters will ask you to confirm their salary, and that's used by them to help prove that, yes, I have the funds for this trip.
Yeah. And where it gets tricky is when the employee may be asking for confirmation of things that you're not aware of or that feel maybe out of scope of something that you would be confirming. You're like, well, we don't have an open visa case on that. Why are we signing off on that? Yeah.
Absolutely. No. And I would keep it to the basics. If you get really funny requests and you're feeling uncertain, definitely reach out to your immigration counsel to double check on that and make sure that it's, there's not something else going on there beyond just confirming their, job title, place of employment, PTO dates, and their salary. Usually I would say 90% of countries, that level of information is going to be sufficient.
Perfect. Well, we've touched on themes of compliance and logistics, which seem to be at the core of what we do here and what you manage. But any sort of final summer holiday travel thoughts, anything we didn't cover that you want to share with our HR Global Mobility Lead listeners?
Yeah, I would just say stay calm and hang in there. It's a tough time of year. Having policies in place before you go into the season is obviously really helpful. But if you find yourself in a position where you're getting all these requests, you don't have the policies, you don't know what to do, definitely reach out to your immigration counsel for support because they should be able to guide you through this and hopefully make your life a little bit less stressful.
Yeah, and hopefully they can take some time off too.
Definitely.
Awesome. Well, as always, Audrey, thanks for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge to help us through the global travel issues we all encounter. And as we talk about, we're seeing them more and more with, in my practice, there's a bigger and bigger focus on global immigration options. So we'll have you back soon because there's going to be more and more topics we'll want to throw your way and get all our questions answered. So thanks for your time and expertise.
Thanks for having me, Laura. It's always fun.